Good morning. Fish and golf with First Blood this morning. Rock and roll. All right, guys. We are sort of going to talk. No, nobody cared. Nobody watched the flipping debate last night, and we're really not going to talk about the debate itself so much as that there was one and why it's amusing that nobody gives a shit.
Something deeper going on.
And good morning. Good morning. Danny says he watched the Trump rally instead. Guys, I didn't watch any politics last night. I watched a movie with my family. Because here's what's going on. Donald Trump is leading all the polls so aggressively that, you know, the fact is there actually is a reasonable concern that there won't be an election next year. And now when I say that, we've talked before on the show about how Roseanne Barr was on Timcast with Michael Malice, and I still maintain, if you haven't seen that, that is entertainment solid gold. It absolutely startlingly hilarious. Now, I'll throw some fact at you. Roseanne is maybe a little too bought into some of the tinfoil hat stuff. Now, on that show, she made the prediction that there will be no election in 2024. And she was pretty clear that what she meant by that is that basically she expects that Biden will use all the threats of World War III and all the bizarre fabricated nonsense about white supremacists being the greatest threat and all that garbage to essentially declare martial law and suspend the elections. However, and she and Michael Malice made a bet to that point. I'm curious as to how they're going to resolve that bet when the time comes, depending on how things go, obviously. I do not actually suspect that Biden will suspend the election through martial law. Now, I could be wrong. We just saw Volodymyr Zelensky announce that basically because the Ukraine is getting their asses whooped, and as long, ever since Hamas went in and pulled a World War II on a music festival in Israel, okay, fair enough. Nobody gives a shit about the Ukraine anymore, and suddenly all the U.S. money's going to the Muslims versus the Jews conflict. So Ukraine is lost, right? That war is essentially over, and Zelensky is begging, literally going on Twitter and the like, and begging, saying, "Look, if you can't give me money, loan it to me, and we'll give you money back." And the desperation is amusing there because obviously, a lot of the whole situation over there can be laid directly at Zelensky's feet, because he tried to have it both ways. He tried to do the lefty thing. He tried to have it both ways. tried to play both sides against the middle and played that little tap dance game where maybe I'll join NATO, maybe I won't join NATO. You know, just I'm going to sit here and shake my congas and play the piano with my dick while America funnels billions of taxpayer dollars into my money laundering campaign for the DNC. And now he's losing. He's losing bad. And Biden's buddy Zelensky, who, let's be fair, was friendly with Trump, has suspended election. He's at least suggesting that he'll suspend election. He said, now is not the time to have an election. We're not sufficiently secure to have an election. Really? I wonder what the American people would have to say about the question of whether or not they should have a choice in replacing a leader who is failing at his job. Right? So the polls over here, it looks like we're going to have an election next year. I don't honestly think that it's going to get delayed by martial law like Roseanne said. However, at the same time that Trump is dominating in all of the polls, right? Everything says that he's going to just destroy it in the primary, and that Biden has no chance of beating him in November. Yeah, polls can be wrong, but they tend to be wrong the other way. What we are looking at is there are several states right now that are pursuing legal actions and attempting to remove Donald Trump from the ballot. And their claim is that because he's an insurrectionist, because he led an insurrection, that there's a clause in the 14th Amendment that says that he can't run for office. Now, there are a lot of problems with that claim. The language in the amendment is sufficiently ambiguous to make it to leave room for a very good argument that the president cannot be guilty of insurrection generally. But even more importantly, in the current legal climate, the current legal analysis, they're claiming that his status as an insurrectionist is the reason that he can be removed or barred from ballots. And the fact of the matter is, no one has been charged with insurrection as a crime, let alone convicted, up to and including Donald Trump. He has not been charged, and not even charged, let alone indicted or convicted of the crime of insurrection. Even among all of the trumped up bullshit charges that we're seeing, the clear conspiracy to defraud the American people and the clear conspiracy to interfere with the upcoming election that's being conducted by multiple district attorneys and judges and Democrat politicians across the country, even amid all of those fallacious and fabricated charges, the charge of insurrection does not exist. So there's actually no room within the law for them to remove him from the ballots, and that's not stopping them from doing it. We've been told very, very clearly, right? The Democrat position, right? It was Thurgood Marshall that said, "You basically we'll do what we want to do, and the law will catch up." I'm sorry, I don't have the exact quote off the top of my head anymore, but essentially it's we'll do what we think is right and make the law catch up. Which, that's legislating from the bench, and we know how that works out. No, legislating from the bench causes problems, not least of which is the fact that it is a crime. Right? Make no mistake, the original Roe v. Wade decision was arrived at by Supreme Court justices committing crime. That crime being the usurpation of authorities, not only not enumerated to them, but explicitly forbidden them by the Constitution. Doubt me now, and then go read Article 1. And then after you read Article 1, which delegates those authorities to the legislative branch, go and check out Article 3 and see if you can find anywhere that those authorities are similarly enumerated in favor of the judicial branch. And I will pay you money if you can show me that distinction, because it is not there. It's rather intentionally and explicitly not there. When I say explicitly not there, it says you are forbidden to have authorities not hereby enumerated to your branch of the 3 co-equal branches of government. I mean, you don't even have to get to the 10th Amendment for that. So last night was the last of the 3 vice presidential debates. Okay, Xander Mack says, unfortunately, there is precedent. Madison Cawthorn wasn't charged or convicted of anything, yet a judge upheld his ineligibility. Granted, that wasn't for president. You're correct, Alex, and I would point out that, likewise, there is precedent for the vice president to choose an alternate set of electors and use those to install the president of his choice rather than the one that was apparently voted for based on concerns about the legitimacy of the election. That was Hawaii in, I forget what year, but you're right. There is precedent. And that's something that they don't concern themselves with. Cameron corrects my quote, you do what you think is right and let the law catch up. Correct. So I was pretty close with my paraphrase. So, all that said, we also know that the Democrat does not concern himself with what the law is. Like, Thurgood Marshall's quote, you do what you think is right and let the law catch up. Biden has on more than one occasion taken actions which are not within the scope of his authority and then said explicitly, right, he did this on the student loan pauses, and he did this on the rent moratorium or the eviction moratoriums, right? Where he said, look, I know I don't have the authority to do this, but it will take the courts months at least to catch up and do anything about it. So I'm going to go ahead and do it anyway. And then we get to just act like I had this authority for a few months and take advantage of that grace period while the courts come in and force me to do things the way that the law requires they be done. So we already know that the Biden administration in particular, and Democrats more generally, give zero fucks about the law. They're just not interested in it. Their only interest in the law is to whatever extent they can abuse it to cause you harm and steal from you. Somebody sent me a message. Let's see who that. Yeah. Because I suspect it's John Salveson. I'm doing a show right now. Why aren't you watching? Okay. So, and I lost a little bit of my train of thought there. Let me get back around to it. So, last night, the also-rans went and threw their hats at the ring, only to watch them blow away under the incredible weight of Trump's bloviating. I do love the Donald. So how did it start?
Awesome, you guys, but that's the last time we're going to... Okay, so that was awesome, you guys, but that's the last time we're going to do that, right?
So it started with the audience shouting, Trump, 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 Trump. And then, of course, you got the moderator comes in and shuts it down. Okay, that was awesome, you guys, but that's the last time we're going to do that. Oh, that's the last time we're going to do that? Let me throw this one at you, sweetheart. Who the fuck do you think you are? You will not curtail my free speech. Obviously, I wasn't there to continue to Trump. And the Junior, I think Junior pretty much covers it. RNC debate audience chanting Trump tells you everything you need to know, folks. It's over, folks, but the swamp grifters and consultants are going to milk their billionaire-funded super PACs to the last cent. Because the swamp cares about money and power, not America. There is something I want to know, and I wish I had a better grasp of how to find these numbers. These billionaire-funded super PACs that Trump Jr. is mentioning, I'd be interested to see how many of the also rans are being funded by Soros indirectly. Because let's be real, we're looking at a situation where any reasonable candidate should have already done the math. And they're not. They're sticking around like flies on stink. And there's no good reason for it, because they're clearly punching above their weight class. The only legitimate reason, and we've cracked the joke before, but it's a fair commentary. The only legitimate reason for any of them to still be sticking around is that they understand that what they're actually running for is they're running to get picked for VP. That's it. And there are a lot of them. Pitt Danny says they're just hanging around waiting for an indictment. Yeah, they honestly believe that an indictment is going to keep him out. But the fact of the matter is, the Constitution seems to support the idea that Trump could be indicted, convicted, incarcerated, and still, from a prison cell, win the election. Right? That's still an option. Now, the cases that are going forward where they're trying to remove him from the ballot are all happening in Democrat states where Trump is likely not going to win, because their states that they're going to vote blue no matter who. But what they're doing there is they're trying to establish the precedent, like Alex mentioned earlier, and try and convince other they're hoping that they can convince some red states that they could do likewise, right? Georgia, for example, we've got a Republican governor nominally, and a mostly Republican state government. But the deep blue here is thick. Just look at the Fani Willis situation. And if somebody generates the precedent for her to work with, I wouldn't put it past Fani Willis to try and remove Donald Trump from the ballot in Georgia. Now, if Trump's not on the ballot in Georgia, that hurts him real bad. That might actually be all that it would take. And they're pretty confident with this strategy of interference, because just like I talked about yesterday, there was one recently, I think it was in Connecticut, where a judge ruled that the Democrat primary in a race was so obviously fraudulent that he shut it down and said, we're going to have to redo it. But in that race, they're going ahead with the primary, or with the general election, and then they're going to do the primary again sometime after the general. And I mean, how much sense does that make to you? Okay, so you're going to have the general. Is the general just between the Republican and the idea that a Democrat will fill the slot after after the general has happened and then there's a primary? It's unclear how that's going to happen, but what is very clear is that they just don't care about getting caught. I ain't gonna lie, I'm sick to death of having the conversation about voter fraud and illegitimate elections. But here's the thing: like we saw an endorsement for Ron DeSantis last night. I forget the woman's name, but she made the statement: "We need somebody who's not looking to the past, but rather looking to the future and what this great nation can be." You're going to hear a lot more of that. We need somebody who's not looking at the past. They're trying to besmirch Trump for his concerns and what they're trying to paint as obsession with the loss in 2020. But here's the thing. As much as I would like to move past all that and just go forward, the fact is that there was fraud. Let's pretend, for the sake of argument for just a moment, that the fraud did not change the outcome. Let's pretend for just a moment that Joe Biden, in fact, won the 2020 election legitimately. Just for the sake of argument. The fact remains that whether or not the fraud changed the outcome, it has changed the outcome in many other elections, and that is a statement of fact. And in those cases, it's found, people are fined. But when's the last time you heard about one of those being overturned? When's the last time you heard about the loser who was cheated then being elevated to the office that was stolen from him? It happens, but it's much rarer. It's much more rare than the illegitimate winner simply going on and being elected and taking the office and paying some fines. The fact of the matter is that fraud occurred in 2020 and there have been no consequences for it. I've had this conversation with many people at higher levels, judges included, and I get the same kind of thing from a lot of them. Basically, there is so much fraud in every election that the court cannot prosecute all of it, and so they choose to prosecute none of it. They figure if they can't bust everybody, then it's not worth busting anybody. That's insane. That is psychotic. Because quite simply, this is a chicken and the egg argument, right? There are no consequences for voter fraud because there's so much voter fraud. Or there's so much voter fraud because there are no consequences for voter fraud. Right? Chicken and the egg. How about there be some actual consequences for voter fraud, and then let's see how many people are willing to go and stick their neck out and mule for the DNC again. And hey, it's happened on both sides. There was James O'Keefe did some great sting operations during the run up to the 2020 election and busted a Republican politician in Texas who was paying people to do ballot harvesting for him. Mr. C says, just like stealing without consequences. Absolutely. You look at places like Los Angeles and especially San Francisco, where they've made a point to declare we will not prosecute anybody for shoplifting under $900 in value. And, color me surprised, it's not just shoplifting that's gone through the roof, but gang raids where they smash through the front of the building and just loot the store. Right? Well, if you've got, 2-3 dozen people smash through, just come charging through your front door and grabbing what they can carry, that it gets pretty hard to enforce the law there. And remember, the law there is don't take stuff that's not yours, right? Don't suck the livelihood out of honest people. And then, of course, I'd ask you this question. How do you think it would go? How do you think it's going to go in court when 24 masked youths smash in through the front of your retail outlet, your retail store, and you open fire on them? Maybe even kill a few of them. We're not seeing that happen. We're not seeing that happen because the cops have been very clear. They will prosecute you and destroy your life if you dare to protect yourself from the ravages of the psychotic left. Now, in fairness, the looters and the rioters, probably not especially political people. They probably, a lot of them probably vote Democrat by default, but are not especially politically literate or invested in particular policy positions. But the fact of the matter is that the left relies on those politically uninitiated, low time preference, violent thugs to commit their political violence on their behalf. That's why Kamala raised money for bail funds. It's that simple. So I'm going to switch gears onto something that I want to have a much more conversation about in the future. And Cameron, frankly, I really want to get you in the studio to talk about this one in particular. This is I'm going to switch over to the, it's still politics, but let's talk about the border a little bit. I want you to look at this picture. These are illegal immigrants crossing into the country, and it says, let's ponder, how did they pay their cell phone bills during their 2 months excursion across 4 countries? How did they pay their cell phone bills during their 2-month excursion across 4 countries? And that, I mean, actually, I replied to that with right here. I said, I've got a better question. What cell phone providers do they use? We need to identify the providers, right? Take a think back at Bud Light and the like, and Target and what happened to them when they got on the wrong side of America, right? We need to identify the cell phone providers. Who are the network providers that are providing network access and coverage to these people? Mr. C says Soros debit cards. Crackshot says Obama phones. Crackshot, I actually doubt that these are Obama phones. Well, no. I wouldn't put it past Obama, the Obama phones program, to be sending phones to foreign nationals. That might be worth looking into a little bit harder. But let's identify which cell phone providers are providing the network plans, right? And then subpoena those groups. I don't know if I don't know how. I'm not sure yet what the legal recourse or the legal route is to subpoena that information. But the cell phone service providers here are providing a service to people who are engaged in a criminal activity. If those people are paying for it themselves, then you're talking about privacy issues and the like, but we'd be surprised to learn that were the case. It's more likely that either, and I think this is the most likely, there is a particular beneficiary, there's an NGO or a private entity who are just paying for cell phone plans, handing out prepaid cards, something of the sort. I'd like to identify who that is and then the law should take action against those entities, those individuals, because quite simply, what you're looking at is somebody who's providing aid and comfort to the enemies of the United States of America, right? Hostile foreign invaders are the enemy of the United States of America, by the way, right? Criminal aliens are a hostile invasion force. The provision of aid to that enemy is the only crime that is explicitly detailed in the Constitution. Article 3, Section 3. Be smart on that. There's a reason that treason is treated the way that it is, and that is severely and harshly. That is the same reason that it's one of the favorite fallback claims of political pundits and commentators, right? I've personally made arguments that Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden should both be charged with treason, and there's a pretty good way to do it. Sergeant Major says there's no legal way to get the information because there's no such thing as international law. Here's my pushback on that, old man. The cell phone company is probably headquartered in the United States, and the funding organization is probably also established in the United States. And if not, let's assume a non-U.S. based cell phone provider company and a non-U.S. based income source, then those entities can be identified as hostile foreign agencies and can be I almost said embargoed, can be sanctioned by the U.S. government. We can just say, okay, we'll seize your assets within the United States, and we'll shut down we won't allow you to operate your services within the borders of the United States. So at least then you get to stop them at the border. Hey, you might be able to sneak across the border, but you're gonna have to find a new cell phone provider. That would be something. Maybe not a lot, but it would have an effect. Not least of which, taking revenue directly out of the pockets of the immigrants themselves. I think that might be a good step in the right direction. Like I said, this is a thought that I had yesterday when I came across this meme doom scrolling. And I thought I'd throw it out to you guys and see if anybody else has some thoughts on it. So leave me some comments under the video if you have any thoughts on that particular question, and I'll try to take a look at those before we start the show tomorrow. Not sure what we're gonna be able to do with it, but it's something worth thinking about. Cameron, absolutely. Cameron says, we know that being unfriendly to border crossing decreases border crossing. Trump proved it. Then Biden came in and border crossing surged. Absolutely. Because Biden came in and he didn't just say, I'm not going to be as harsh as Trump. He said, come on in. We want you here. He literally did a public announcement, a press release, to explicitly invite the border crossers to come in. So y'all think about that a little bit. Leave me some comments under this video, and come back tomorrow morning for it. Good God, is it Thursday or is tomorrow Firearms Friday already? I took 2 days off and it completely screwed up my concept of week. Yeah, it's Firearms Friday tomorrow, so y'all come back in the morning and we'll knock that out. Y'all be safe out there. We love you, and we will see you tomorrow.